I was the infamous girl accused of murder.
The prosecution decided to appeal the acquittal and you had to face trial again.
All I wanted was to get back to my life, like the life of being an anonymous college student. As soon as I actually landed in Seattle, I walked out of the plane to a press conference. Helicopters followed me home. I fulfilled this deeply evil female archetype in people's minds that was highly sexualized and highly vilified.
Welcome back to part 2 of my chat with Amanda Knox. What an incredible person Amanda is. Now, if anyone has the right to feel fucked over, it's Amanda. What she's been through is unimaginable. In this part, we find out how, upon her release from prison, life didn't just return to normal. She was retried again for the murders, a process that took another 4 years before she was finally free. Upon her release, she got a sense of the media's interest in her story and the impact that had on her day-to-day life. But importantly, Amanda explains how she came to terms with what happened to her, how it changed her, the friendships she has formed, and the important work she is doing in the innocence programs. Have a listen to what Amanda has to say. It taught me a lot about dealing with the setbacks we all experience in life. I'm definitely a fan of how she goes about her business. Have a listen. Amanda Knox, welcome back to part 2 of I Catch Killers.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I've got all my notes here, but I'm going off script a lot because I just find it fascinating. And, it's great that you can sit here and smile and I can smile. And I think, my perspective comes from seeing people that have been caught up in horrible situations, and you've certainly been caught up in a horrible situation. But the fact that you can still smile is impressive because you had every right to be bitter and twisted.
I mean, I'm just grateful to be alive right now. Again, I came this close to being, potentially murdered. If I hadn't been spending the night with my boyfriend, who knows what would have happened. And so as much as this has been a really traumatic situation, it does not escape me ever that of the two of us, me and Meredith, I was one who got to go home. And so it's very a precious thing to be alive.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for it, and I'm grateful for the opportunity it gives me to live and to find joy and to find purpose. So I'm not going to complain about anything.
Well, I want to talk more on the philosophical side of things a little bit later in the podcast, because I do find it fascinating, and the innocence program that you've got yourself involved in, and we've had people on this podcast over the years that have been wrongfully convicted and spent time in prison. There was one particular guest, I don't know, you might have heard of him, Evaristo Sales, who spent incredible story, 16, charged with murder. Put in one of the toughest prisons in California. I think he spent 20 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Went in as a 16-year-old kid that the prison uniform wouldn't even fit him. Managed to get through it. And when we were interviewing him, I don't think I said 2 words during the whole course of the interview because he was just telling his story and I was just gobsmacked what he'd been through. But we were recording from the bedroom set up like a 16-year-old's bedroom because the 20 years his parents kept the bedroom for him, and that's where he was living after he got into prison.
Oh, my God.
But talk about a good outlook on life. I walked away and I felt like I'd been sitting down with the Dalai Lama in the way that he was, could process what had happened to him and how he was going to make the most of his life following that. So harsh experiences can sometimes, it can be the make or break, and it's the way you choose to accept it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I would wish that or my experience on anyone else, right?
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that you're going to come out of that experience a stronger or better person. In fact, it really is the chips are stacked against you, and
Yeah.
it takes a very specific kind of perspective that allows you to overcome the grief and the loss.
Mm.
Like I think one of the things that is really hard to describe about being wrongly convicted and spending a long time in a very punishing environment as a result of being wrongly convicted is
Mm.
it's not like you have post-traumatic stress disorder from a single isolated incident.
Yeah.
It's like there's this whole period of your life that is just a traumatic period of survival and injustice, and that's just like your every waking moment is tainted by this injustice that you are stuck with,
Yeah.
and that can plunge you into the deepest depths of like despair and madness.
Yeah.
Or you can approach that despair and you can grieve for yourself, and you can say to yourself, well, but this is my life. Like, this is my life to
Yeah.
live. And I still get a say in how I live it and what becomes of me. Um, and I think that I don't know. I mean, for me, I have met a lot of wrongly convicted people who have
Yeah.
also had that same surprisingly positive outset. And
Yeah.
I wonder if it's because like just the fact of living with an injustice for a long time and not having it come to any kind of resolution for a long time allows you to sit really get like it's a practice of sitting with the discomfort
Yeah.
of uncertainty, and it forces you to position yourself in your own mind so that you are not just utterly helpless, like that you
Mm.
can make choices. It's a weird like catch 22 of being denied fulfillment and purpose
Yeah.
is y- you sort of make your own and you do the best with what you have. And I to this day feel like I'm so lucky I'm not a man and I wasn't sent to a man's prison
Yeah.
because it's so much more violent, and the
Uh,
sexual violence is even worse in men's prisons than women's, right?
yeah.
Like women are not typically raping each other in prison.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I definitely had bad encounters with male guards, but like I never was facing the terrible horrific things that a 16-year-old boy is going to face.
I've spoken to quite a few people. We had a lot of high-profile journalists and people in this country locked up. Sean Turnell, an economist that was locked up in Myanmar for crimes that he didn't commit. Peter Grester, locked up in Egypt with.
Wow.
He was a journalist. Uh, Chung Lei, who was locked up in. She was a journalist locked up in China. You wouldn't believe what she went through,
Oh my
and
gosh.
Kylie Moore Gilbert locked up in Iran. She was an academic. I had them on in a probably over a 12-month period, and I walked away from each and every one of them going, "Wow, where did you get that insight?" So there's something for it, but you explained it nicely there. It could work to let you get through it if you survive it, but it could also change you. There was something in your book that, while we're on this subject, talk about that you posed a question to yourself in your latest book, Free. Could I ever be anything more than the girl accused of murder? Would I ever be free? And then you make reference to trying to answer those questions led you to studying Stoicism and Zen Buddhism and researching resilience and post-traumatic stress. And from those studies and your own self-reflections, you came to the acceptance that pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. Pain is
Yeah.
inevitable, but suffering is a choice. Can we just expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, oh, yay. We're going to talk philosophy. Yay. I
Yeah.
love that. I thank you for that opportunity. So the difference between pain and suffering to me is that pain is what you experience. Like, I'm not the type of person who is going to say that there's nothing good or bad, right? Like, you
Mm.
stub your toe, you feel pain. You lose your friend in a car accident. You have pain. Like, there are things in life that cause us pain, that cause us grief. Suffering is when we impose a meta layer of pain on top of the pain that we are already experiencing by sort of denying the reality of pain itself. So when we say to ourselves, I shouldn't have stubbed my toe,
Mm.
like, you already stubbed your toe,
Yeah.
and now you're causing yourself extra grief by thinking that the world should have been otherwise, that your toes shouldn't have been, stubbed, that
Uh,
you
you're
didn't get in the car.
compounding on the pain.
You're compounding upon the pain. And I
Yeah.
think that it was an amazing insight for me in prison to come to the realization that absolutely I had never envisioned for myself being imprisoned for a crime that I didn't commit,
Yeah.
right? Like, that was a terrible, painful thing that was happening to me. But also, if I was stuck just being bitter and angry over the fact that my life wasn't the life that I had hoped for,
Mm.
that was not actually assisting me and serving me in the process of living the life that I actually had,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like that is a danger that we all can fall prey to, is like really causing ourselves more pain and despair than necessary, and that gets in the way of us effectively living our life by becoming fixated on the life that we should have lived as opposed to the
Yeah.
life that we are actually living.
It's a simple philosophy, but sometimes the simple things are the best way to look at things. I draw on a couple more things from your book while we're on this subject. This is another quote in your book from that great philosopher Amanda Knox, where she where she states,
I quote myself in my own book. Like, what is wrong with me?
to be free is to be powerful. And if your power is kindness, you're always free. No one can stop you from being kind. Can we expand on that from that great philosopher? What's your
Yeah.
interpretation?
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
Can anyone stop you from being kind? Like, there are a million ways that you can feel thwarted in your own life. And especially as I like approached the prospect of trying to confront my prosecutor, trying to confront the people
Yeah.
who had harmed me, it occurred to me that if I was waiting on somebody else to do justice by me, to show me the kindness
Yeah.
that I deserved, that I didn't get, that was, first of all, a losing mission, because that made it so that my well-being depended on other people, and it rendered me helpless. Like, once again, I'm just helpless. I'm
Yeah.
waiting for somebody to recognize that I didn't do a bad thing, I didn't deserve a bad thing to happen to me, and that, you know there, for someone to say they're sorry or something. Or I can figure out what I have in me to give.
Yeah.
And I looked genuinely in myself and I was like, you know what? Like, if I really am honest with myself, I feel compassion for these people.
Yeah.
I don't just like hate them. Like, I I genuinely want to understand them, and I have found that genuinely understanding somebody requires you to become close with them,
Yeah.
requires a kind of intimacy,
Mm.
and a sort of inevitable byproduct of intimacy is compassion. At
Yeah.
the very least, I have found that.
Yeah.
And the way that I know how to express my compassion, those feelings, is through kindness. And like, who's gonna stop me? No
Yeah.
one. No one can stop me,
You
like,
got
from
total
being nice to
control.
So, like, there's real freedom in that, in feeling like, what is the thing that I can do, that I really have in me,
Yeah.
that no one can stop me from doing? Like, that was a truly coming into myself and really allowing, like, coming out of that feeling of helplessness and really feeling fulfilled and embodied.
Yeah. I can see how it works. I honestly can. In fact, after I read that passage in the book, I was out in my garden. It was a beautiful summer's morning. I'd trained. I was feeling good about life, hosing the plants. I think because I'm in conflict with quite a few people over over different things, and I think I'm
Yeah.
just going to let it go and show kindness. And it was going well as I'm there. And then I got to a couple of people, and I thought, no, fuck that.
Well,
but
you're on your journey.
but
That's okay.
I'm trying. I'm going, yeah, yeah. Forgive this, forgive that. Yep, no, that's good. My mistake. And I was feeling all generous. And then I got to certain people, and I thought, nah. But I'm
Yeah.
working on it.
Well, and you know what? Like, it's interesting that you say forgive. Like, I
Yeah,
forgive this, I forgive that.
yeah.
Like, I didn't really set out to forgive anybody. Like, I didn't
Okay.
have some high
Yeah,
aspirational idea of forgiving people. I wanted to understand people. But, like,
yeah,
again, it was sort of forgiveness sort of creeps up on you when you
yeah,
realize, truly, truly realize the fragility of another human being.
yeah, yeah,
So that's where like forgiveness kind of creeps in the back door when you realize that everyone is a toddler
yeah,
and doesn't know what they're doing. And like even when they think they know what they're doing, they're driven by impulses that are not fully in their control.
yeah,
And you just go, I just gotta, I don't know, I just gotta, I can hold that gently, even
yeah.
if it's not okay. It doesn't mean that you tolerate
Yeah,
bad behavior and
but it,
injustice.
it, it is something you can control. And I was listening to your podcast that you do with your husband, Chris Labyrinth or whatever, and I think it was one of the early ones. And you were talking about when he stuffed up or something, you two were fighting, and one of you, I forget which one it was saying, well, how would you treat your young child if they had made a mistake? And so you're treating Chris like a young child, not in a condescending way, but just going,
No, not in a
okay,
condescending way, but
okay,
yeah, like,
made a mistake. How would I react if a child did that? Well, I'd say, well, you shouldn't have done that, and explain it. And I thought, again, that was a simple philosophy. It made me
yeah.
laugh, but yeah,
I
it's
mean, I gotta say, ever since becoming a mom and especially being a mom of toddlers, I have found that just going into mom mode with everyone, which is a
yeah,
kind of like
that
it is a universal sort of accepting love that's still like firm and setting boundaries, but like is not there to punish anybody. It's
yeah,
just there to like hold them in their imperfection.
yeah, yeah. No, well, it's again simple but effective. We finished part one talking about the police investigation, and I think we've the way I'd like to describe it is my observation of it, and certainly things that you've been documented in saying is the facts are the facts didn't support any conviction of yourself and Raphael in regards to the murder. You spent 4 years in prison before the conviction was overturned. You're released from prison. Then the prosecution decided to appeal the acquittal, and you had to face trial again. So
Yes.
we're jumping around, but there's so many fascinating parts to your story. After you were released from prison, you've been acquitted. You thought, okay, I've been through the worst moments of my life. I can now get on with my life. But when you were released from prison, the world had changed, you had changed, and things weren't that simple. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, I when I was in prison, I really felt what it felt like for me was that I was living somebody else's life by mistake.
Yep.
And all I wanted was to get back to my life,
Mm.
like the life of being an anonymous college student. And I fantasized uh, indefinitely about that.
Yeah.
And, but as soon as it appeared to me, like as soon as I actually like landed in Seattle, I was not an anonymous college student.
Mm.
I was the infamous girl accused of murder, and I walked out of the plane to a press conference, and helicopters followed me home, and and because the case wasn't settled, like I went through another
Yeah.
4 years of trial, it was like my entire life was still, you know, in the public interest. Like, and so I was constantly being followed. I mean, for years, like
Mm.
I, w- I would go out for a walk with my friends and see someone skateboarding and be like, oh, there's a skateboarder. And then all of a sudden that skateboarder would pull a camera out of
Yeah.
his backpack and be photographing me. Like any person on the street could have been like a photographer in disguise. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so I lived in a state of like hypervigilance and paranoia that made me very isolated. It made me feel like I didn't really belong to the rest of humanity because,
Yeah.
again, I was being so highly scrutinized constantly. Um, my own attorneys told me that, again, like so much of the case was about the story and the
Yeah.
characters in the story and not about the evidence. And so they said, you have to be really careful who you trust. You have to be really careful about how you appear in public because people are still judging you. People are
Mm.
still looking to find evidence of you being a guilty person. And so, and they're going to interpret you in the worst possible light, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So they sort of, they they scared me into the realization that I had to be perfect and I could not make mistakes.
Yeah.
Tell that to a 25-year-old.
That's not the way you want to be living your life at 25, catching up for
Yeah.
four years that you've missed out on too. Um,
Yeah.
the way you were portrayed in the media, and that played a part, I think, and this is just my observation from afar, in the way that you were portrayed in the media and the interest in getting a conviction against you. Describe how you were portrayed in the media for those, a few of the people that haven't heard how you were portrayed. Describe how you were portrayed in the media during the time in Italy leading up to the trial and different things from there.
Yeah. Well, I had a number of nicknames.
Mm.
One of them, the one that sort of made its rounds around the world was Foxy Noxy, and that was derived from an old soccer nickname that was on my old MySpace page that some journalist found, and then they just thought that was a perfect little headline grabbing nickname.
But that's a cool name for a
Well,
soccer player.
I thought it was
Yeah,
cool when I was 13,
yeah.
but it didn't, like people
Didn't
sort
work
of
then.
warped it into this like sex fiend kind
Yeah,
of vibe. The I had a few other nicknames in Italy. I think the one that really hit me hard was Luciferina, so
yeah.
female Lucifer.
Right, just
And
evil.
yeah, so I was portrayed as this, on the one hand, being this, that the typical American stereotype of like some hypersexualized bimbo
Yeah,
who had like zero morals and zero inhibitions.
yeah,
And on the other hand, I was also depicted as this like cunning, manipulative criminal mastermind
yeah,
who had orchestrated a sex murder orgy and then had led the police astray using my like feminine wiles and machinations. And so I fulfilled this like deeply evil female archetype in
yeah,
people's minds that was highly sexualized and highly vilified. It was almost cartoonish.
yeah,
And again, I was 20 years old when this started being this narrative about who I was took hold of the public imagination.
yeah,
And I mean, I was barely a person yet, and I certainly wasn't hypersexualized or I was not
yeah,
hypersexual or a villain. And so here I am having to interact with the world that expects something deeply opposite from what I am.
yeah,
And it felt like no matter what I did and no matter what I said, people were continuing to view me in this way because it was just so satisfying
yeah.
to imagine this character.
Well,
And
it
some,
had all
yeah.
the all the titillation of someone the sexual murder orgy, manipulating police. It's like what was that movie with Sharon Stone on it? The murder.
Oh, yeah, with where she crosses her legs
Yeah,
very
yeah,
yeah.
that's the one. With that, but that was people fascinated by that type of thing, and the media played it, fed it, and everything that was reported was steering it the focus on you and creating you to be a character that you're not. That must be hard because I would imagine, and we were talking off record. Sometimes you want to shout from the rooftops, "Hold it, this is not me," but you weren't in a position to do that.
No, and I mean, even when I went out there and spoke publicly,
Mm,
I eventually did do interviews and I tried to tell my side of the story, and it it always felt like the narrative, which had existed already for years,
yep.
was had a whole life of its own. And trying to tell a different story was very difficult because
Yeah.
what's better? Like, it was the story of this, like, girl next door gone wild who's secretly this, like, sex demon is a
That get that
great story.
that gets more clickbait than no.
It's
She was just a quiet
it's
girl
more
that
clickbaity.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And so who I am in real life in comparison to this figure is not interesting.
yeah.
And so how do I compete with that?
Mm,
And you can't. And I also was struggling with the idea of, like, how reactive do I have to be to this? Because
yeah,
I certainly can't just not be reactive. People are trying to put me in prison, so I
yeah,
have to confront this narrative. I think I intuited that it was a losing battle to, like, always be defending myself
yeah,
in every instance. So instead, I really just wanted to be me. I wanted
yeah,
to do good work in the world and be the person I really was. And but I was constantly being having doors slammed in my face because of this image of me, and it didn't help that even though I was acquitted of murder, I was never actually fully acquitted of all the crimes that were ascribed to
yeah.
me. I was found guilty of criminal
With
slander because of my interrogation.
for
And
your
so people,
employer, yeah,
yeah,
the
and so they
bartender, yeah,
everyone would point to that and say, well, either she got away with murder, but she's really a murderer who got away with it, or even if she is innocent of that crime, she's still a criminal and we can't trust her and she's a liar. And so, like, it,
yeah,
there was there was nothing I could do right, and it really was a long, arduous process of feeling like every day that I woke up, I had to prove my innocence over and
yeah.
over and over again. And it was utterly exhausting. And it made me just want to disappear. But of course, I couldn't disappear because people were just stalking me all the time. And yeah, it was a deeply difficult many, I mean, decade and more of my life before I, like, slowly
Yeah.
came into situations with individual people who recognized me for who I really was.
Well, there was a turning point, if I remember rightly, when you were invited to a conference from was it Idaho Innocence?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the director of the Idaho Innocence Project,
Tell us about
yeah.
that, and because I think that was a watershed moment for you in the way that you looked at things.
Yeah, it really was because, again, like, prior to all of this, I had no experience with criminal justice related issues. Like,
Yeah.
that was not what I was interested in. I didn't even read mystery novels, right? Like, that wasn't my thing. So I didn't really have a concept for how what happened to me fit into the historical record of criminal justice. Like,
Yeah.
as far as I knew, I was the only person that had ever gone through something like this, and no one would ever understand me or believe me. And I was really struggling. My mom was really worried about my mental health. um I also just happened to have been reconvicted right around this time,
Yeah.
so I was facing extradition. My life was just in shambles, and a friend, someone who had become a friend of our family, who had like sort of been paying attention to the case, this person who investigates wrongful conviction
Yep.
cases, the director of the Idaho Innocence Project, Greg Hampikian, he reached out to my mom and told her about this once a year gathering of, you know, innocence projects,
Yep.
wrongly convicted people, lawyers, scientists, private investigators who all come together to, share their resources and, all of that. Conference. It's a
Yep.
conference. And he said that it would really help me to go. But at the time, going into a room full of hundreds of people who would recognize me and who I did not know was
Not.
like my worst nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my mom just put her foot down and was like, "We're going." So she pops me into the car. We drive down to Portland, Oregon, where it happened to be taking place that year. And as I'm entering into this, these gathering places, this ballroom where people are gathering,
Yeah.
I'm immediately recognized, even though by this time I have done things to alter my appearance. I'm wearing big glasses. I've cut my hair really short.
Yeah.
I guess like I still have my face, so I'm
Yeah.
recognizable, but I had done
Really
I had
tried
done
to
what I
change.
could to be
Yeah.
different looking. And still, I was immediately recognized by these two guys who immediately came up to me and they gave me a really big hug and told me that they were both exonerees. They had both been wrongly convicted,
Yeah.
and each of them had spent over a decade in prison for crimes that they didn't commit. And
Mm.
like, what they said to me was that I didn't have to explain anything to them, that they already knew.
Yeah.
And just like the relief that swept through me was I was not, I didn't realize how wound up I was and how small I felt
Yeah.
until like that breath sort of swept through me and I loosened a bit. And I realized that here I am standing in a room full of hundreds of people, at least 100 of them
Yeah.
are people who have been in my exact situation. And that was validating for me that like I wasn't just alone in this
Yeah.
experience, that there are people who could understand me and that I mattered. Like, sure, I'm just a drop in a bucket, but like all of us matter.
Yeah.
Everything that happened to us, all of us mattered. And it really put me on a path of figuring out what it is that I can do with the fact that I have this in my
Mm.
life now. It's a
Yeah.
part of me now. What do I do with it?
Yeah.
And that gave me my first glimpse of an opportunity.
So, well, some purpose and the platform, all the things that were negative, the profile and all that. I would imagine you will be able to make a difference in that space, understanding what's you've occurred to you, and you also found your tribe, so it would have helped you emotionally, and from that point of view, other people that you could um, would understand what you've been through. But I would imagine after the whole playing out in the media, the time in prison, the court, that there would have been part of you that just wanted to crawl under a rock and never, live in a deserted cabin in the woods and never speak to anyone again. But
Yeah, yeah. But like, you know what? The thing that was stolen from me
yeah,
in a way was human connection.
yeah,
Like I was plucked out of freedom and thrown in a jail cell and told that I was a monster. And I was made to feel like I didn't belong to other people anymore.
mm,
And finding my tribe in the wrongly convicted community was my first sort of feeling like I belonged to people again. And it gave me the hope that I could belong to the broader humanity again.
yeah,
Like, I'm not a monster. I've
yeah.
just had a bad thing happen to me. And that doesn't have to be a reason for disconnection. It can be a reason for connection.
Okay. Not being a monster, there would have been times where you must have been sitting in a prison cell and everything that's happening to you, just thinking, am I a bad person? Why does society need to be protected from me? It
Mm.
must play with your mind. I can't imagine what it's like going through that in there for that length of time. But then I suppose with the people that you've met, and the person I reference, he spent 20 years, and you saw a lot of people that spent a lot longer than you did in jail for crimes that they didn't commit.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I was definitely lucky in comparison. I mean, it's funny, when I was in prison, you're right, you do come up with like you're frantically trying to figure out why is this happening to
yeah,
me? And I at no point did I think I deserved it, although I did really struggle with my like what happened during my interrogation and how I did not understand what had happened to me. But I did think, like, in a Final Destination kind of thing, I thought that maybe like, I the crazy thing that came into my mind was I supposed to suffer in my childhood, but then, like, suffering forgot about me, and now it was just piling on all the suffering all at once? Like, I just could not comprehend, like, why.
you cashed in all your credit cards in your
I
childhood, and
I guess
yeah,
so. I just had like the good childhood and now like doom and gloom had come to like get what's theirs and
yeah,
I just was getting everything bad happening to me all at once. And yet at the same time, I'm alive,
yeah.
right? Like I'm alive.
Puts it in
There's still
perspective.
hope for me, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, and when and I would imagine the way that you're forever connected with Meredith, you would often reflect on that you could have been home at the time, and it could have been completely different circumstances.
Yeah, no, not a day goes by that I do not think about how I'm the lucky
Yeah.
one of the two of us.
Now the meeting and in your book, and there's so many things in your book, in both your books, that I'd encourage people, if they're interested in what we're talking about, have a look for in depth the type of things that we're talking about. But with meeting with the prosecutor, Giuliano Maggini. Now I spelt that out phonetically and tried to pronounce it that way.
It's Giuliano Mignini.
Giuliano Maggini,
There you go.
important.
Very good.
Um, if there's one person that had control of what you went through, it was probably the prosecutor there.
Yes.
But you felt the need to meet with him. Tell us about that and the process there.
Well, because I was so haunted by that why question, right?
Yep,
Like why did this happen to me?
yep,
A- And in a way, I could bring all that back to Rudy Gaudet, the person who murdered my roommate. If he hadn't murdered her, none of this would ever have happened to me. But like Giuliano Magnini was really the sort of author of all the bad things that followed for me.
yep,
Like past the trauma of losing a friend, like Giuliano Magnini was the one who targeted me. He was, head of the investigation, the prosecutor. He really was the one who crafted this narrative about me and pushed for it and pushed for my imprisonment. And I didn't understand why. Like, I think the thing that really to this day bothers me about this case, and I'm asking also you as a
yeah.
homicide investigator, like, it's not that this case wasn't solved, right? Like, in a lot of wrongful conviction
Yeah.
cases, part of the reason why wrongful conviction happens is because there's not enough evidence to really figure out what really happened.
Well,
And
they're looking for the perpetrator. I'll just jump in there on that question. The person that was convicted for the rape and the involvement in the murder, how they kept tying you into that scenario is just I'm gobsmacked. Like, I look at it and I look from a perspective of a police officer or an investigator. How could they make that mistake? To me, it looked like it was ego that stopped them opening their minds up to, hey, we got it wrong, targeting Amanda. But they just stuck to it because they didn't want to admit they're wrong. That's my take on it. Rudy, I think all the evidence is supporting for the fact that his involvement in it. He's served his time. He's been convicted of it. He's out now, which, I don't get involved in the sentences, but he was convicted of it. It's not like they couldn't find someone else. So the fact that you speak to the prosecutor, I respect that, and you want him to know who you are as a person, and you want to find out who he is. But I feel I can't find excuses for him. I'm not saying I'm angry at him. I just can't find excuses for him because the answers were fairly obvious. You can have
Mhm.
your hypothesis, you can have
Mhm.
your theories, but when the facts don't correspond with that, you accept that okay, you mightn't be following the right path. But it seems like it was totally ignored when they found the person responsible for the murder. But they thought, oh well, we'll still drag you pair into it as well.
Yeah, well, and I agree, like, I think my approaching him was also not like I said, it wasn't because I was chasing forgiveness,
Yeah,
like, I wasn't trying that was not my goal, nor was it my goal to make excuses for him,
yeah,
right? Like, I'm not interested in excuses.
yeah,
I want answers. And so when I approached him, I my goal was to try to figure out the why of it, was the real
okay, yeah,
answers. And I knew that he would not be inclined to tell me the truth and be vulnerable and potentially
mm,
acknowledge mistakes that he had made if I had approached him as an adversary, if
yeah.
I had put him immediately on the defensive and demanded that he hold himself accountable for his mistakes and acknowledge
He'd
them.
block you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, he would block me.
Mm,
He had no reason to do that for me, even though it was the right thing to
yeah.
do. So instead, I thought, well, how can I have an effective conversation with him where he'll actually just be honest with me?
Mm,
And I thought, well, first of all, I can't assume anything, right? Like I can take note of the factual things that he did, but I cannot assume anything about his intentions, right? Like, and if anything, maybe what I should do is try to be a little more generous than I might want to be in this moment as someone who was hurt,
yeah.
and really embrace the fact that the vast majority of us wake up every morning wanting to be the good guys.
Yeah,
And
I agree with that.
right, including my prosecutor.
Mm,
And so what kind of mental gymnastics might he be consciously and unconsciously doing in order to make himself be still the good guy at the end of the day? And it was really that, like, that realization, plus the realization that the first way to have an effective communication with someone is to try to find common ground,
yeah,
to establish a sense of like, you're a human, I'm a human, we have this in common. And I made a guess, and it was a correct guess, that given the very public nature of the case, not only did I feel misrepresented and vilified, but very
yeah,
likely he did too. And so when I first reached out to him, I said that I believed that even though he had harmed me and that he had made mistakes, that he had not done so maliciously, like
yeah,
intentionally, and that I thought that he was very likely maligned in many ways. And I was not interested in maligning him. I was interested in understanding him and knowing him. And he was kind of gobsmacked by that. No one he had ever prosecuted had ever reached out to him, much less in that kind of way.
yeah,
But like it surprised him enough that he was I think maybe the honor part of him was like, well, I can't respond negatively to that. Like
yeah,
I, you know, I should respond to because it's like I sort of approached him honorably. And so it would have been dishonorable to just ignore me or,
yeah.
and,
Okay, so
and
you tapped into
right.
that. Yep.
And that began a communication. And to be clear, I do not make excuses for him,
Yeah,
nor do I like ignore the things that he did. I have absolutely confronted him many, many times about the mistakes that he made that led to direct harm to me.
yeah,
And Sometimes he is able to accept and acknowledge those mistakes.
Yep.
And sometimes he's not, because he's in his mind still constructing a narrative about how things are not his fault, or how things, he still believes that, like he still says that the break-in was staged, like he,
Yeah.
to this day, he's just like,
Yeah.
well, no one can convince me otherwise. And it's like, well, okay, that's your opinion, I guess. Like, it's not a
Yeah.
fact. That's just your opinion, and you guess I can't convince you not of your opinion. So, okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, how do you deal with
how do
that? Yeah.
you confront that? Like,
Yeah.
how, okay, I guess you're just gonna, maybe you feel safe in that being your opinion, and because if you put himself or
Yeah.
yourself in his shoes, it would be devastating for him to realize that that was a mistake, because everything that he deduced from
Well,
that was
you
wrong.
you I think, yeah, trying to find goodness in people, and it was, I think, in your book where your mother told you, yeah, the one thing I want you to be in life as an 8-year-old girl was kind. Um, Being kind to him in the way that the respectful way that you've treated, because you could be, yeah, carrying on completely different in regards to him. I think it does, and it falls back into what you talk about, taking control. The one thing that you can control, and one thing that you can't take away from me, is my kindness. So it shows you to be the person that you are. But it's unbelievable story, like twists and turns.
So
Yeah,
many. I feel so bad that we don't have like a
I
million hours,
I
because it's
look.
like twists and turns.
Look at all my
So
notes. Just
many.
throw them out the door. Look, we will we'll talk about what you're doing now. Let's just sum up that you were convicted of a crime you didn't commit. You did time in prison. You've come through it. The media attention and what you've been through, no one should have to go through. But you've survived it. And I want to talk about your life now and all the projects that you're. Oh, well, even your speech in Italy, when you went back to Italy. I'm just going to read this extract. Give me time to read
Okay.
this
Okay.
extract out, because this is an extract from your speech when the Innocence program over in Italy invited you over there to talk, and you had reservations. And this is just a small extract, but to give people a sense of how you felt when you were going through all this drama. I was a liar, a psychopath, a dirty drug-addled slut, so jealous of Meredith's purity that I raped and killed her. Guilty until proven innocent. It was a false and unfounded story, but it sparked the world's imagination. It spoke to people's fears and fantasies. I think, and I pulled that out because that sort of encapsulated in a nutshell how you were treated. And it was pretty horrific, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really, really bad.
Yeah,
It was really bad.
yeah,
Yeah, and I've learned a lot from it. And one thing I wanted to mention
yeah,
on your podcast today was, now I look into other cases, and I try
yeah,
to support other wrongly convicted people. And, I have like made the mistake before. For instance,
yeah,
I don't know if you knew this, but I advocated for someone who I believed was innocent. But
yeah,
then after I looked more into the evidence, I realized that he was really guilty.
yeah,
And that was a devastating
yeah,
realization, that like, again, a learning experience, is
mm,
like, okay, I too am coming into situations with biases. I'm
yeah,
assuming that, the
yeah,
police are not being forthcoming and are not, like all of that. So how do I be a more fair-minded person who's going to approach these really difficult
yeah,
scenarios with an objective point of
mm,
view, or at least acknowledging my subjective biases? And that's led me to a new case that I've been investigating, and I'm going to be imminently reporting on,
yeah.
which is the Lucy Letby case that is happening in the UK right now. Have you been
the
following it at
the
all?
the nurse that was charged with harming multiple children, I think, convicted of 7 murders. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
and also accused, and also 6 attempted murders on top of that, and
yeah,
still being investigated. Has, many whole life sentences. Um, she's, I think she's 38 years old
yeah,
now. She's like my age,
yep,
and she. I think the thing that's really haunted me about this story is when it was first really big in the news.
mm,
You know, I'm I wasn't looking for her case. Her case came looking for me.
Yep.
Like tons of people reached out to me to say, "Hey, we're seeing the demonization
Yeah.
of a young woman based upon really questionable evidence happening here in the UK.
Yeah.
And we feel like the only person who's going to like immediately recognize what's going on is you. Can you do something about it?" Like
Yep.
multiple people reached out to me
Right.
separately
Okay.
saying like,
Puts
please look
it.
into this
Yeah.
case. And, I had been um I had been burned before on
Mm.
a case where I was like, okay, this feels really familiar, but is it really a wrongful conviction case? I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to look into the evidence. But this one is one that's like so fascinating because it really it's not just an indictment of like the justice system and whether or not there is a fair trial being had here. It's also a broader indictment of like the National Health Service and our impulse to try to blame people when
Yeah.
something tragic happens that
Yeah.
may not have been a crime at all. And I think that's something that you don't what you do see it in a lot of cases when women are wrongly accused
Well,
of.
we've had in Australia, we've had some very high profile. Lindy Chamberlain,
Mm-hmm.
it became Meryl Streep played her in a Hollywood movie, The Dingo's Got My Baby,
Yeah.
charged and finally acquitted. Of the allegation, Kathleen Folbig. She was charged with murdering four of her children, and then the scientific evidence that came in that contradicted it wasn't a sound conviction, and she was acquitted. When medical science, when science comes into play, there's interpretations. You can get an expert, and then another expert can say
Yep.
another thing. And the advances in medical science causes problems with the courts to be able to try to interpret it. My reading of the story you're talking about there is there's also failings in the health system that
Yeah.
it's easy to cast, and I'm just assuming here, but if it was wrongful convictions, cast aspersions on someone to counter the fact that we're not looking after the children properly. But that's a big responsibility, or it's a big project you're taking on. So you're not shying away from it, and it would be
No, no,
confronting.
it keeps finding me and how can I say no when somebody's life is on the line,
Yeah, yeah,
And it really matters to get these things right. And if these kids really were murdered, it matters to like
yeah,
really understand what happened. And I think right now what's so disconcerting is that these families are left in this state of
yeah,
uncertainty. It's not clear how, if at all, this woman murdered
yeah,
these kids. And so like it's a really scary case because like she very quickly overnight went from being an anonymous, young nurse
yeah.
to the most hated woman in the UK and being described as like the Jack the Ripper of babies.
Yeah. Oh
It's
well,
it's
there's
wild.
nothing worse than people that murder children. It's coming out in the podcast. Are you doing
Yes,
a
yeah.
podcast? And
Yeah, so I'm working with iHeart on a podcast that is going to be called Doubt.
okay, well that's interesting. I'll have a look out for that. Finish off with thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You've been someone I wanted to speak to for a very long time, and I think looking at the philosophy of the way that you've approached things, I've learned a lot, and I'm sure people listening to it, like if there's an injustice, well, yours sits right up there, and you've managed to come through it. And I often, and it's not in forgiveness, kindness, or whatever, but sometimes I'm motivated by when I get a setback. My way of getting through it is live your best life. That's the way to
Mm-hmm.
get back. And I think anyone that's done harm to you or the circumstances that brought you into what happened to you, the life that you're living now, that is the best way to deal with it, living that best life. So
It's
congratulations.
true. Yeah, it is kind of the best revenge.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.